So on the next slide, I just rewrote the stuff that we already knew, right? That we already determined: our sample size, our number of successes, our alpha, which is our significance level, our null hypothesis, alternative hypothesis. We determined our test statistic was negative 5.36, and our p-value was so small that it's approximately 0. Do you reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis? Now, based on the fact that I just know my p-value and my alpha, I'm going to use the p-value method here. If I wanted to use the other method, then I would have to find my critical value. If I don't need it, I'm not going to find it. For practice, you could do that. But because my p-value is 0, that indicates, or that tells me, that my p-value is less than alpha. I'm always comparing the p-value to the alpha. Alpha is 0.01. It's not a very big alpha, but the p-value is smaller than that. And anytime the p-value is smaller than alpha, we always reject the null hypothesis. We are rejecting the null hypothesis. Do you reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis? We reject the null hypothesis. State your conclusion in the context of the original problem. This interpretation is going to be very standard. If I'm rejecting the null, and I do this for my students, this is just for help with interpretation. When I reject the null, sometimes I'll just cross it off because I'm rejecting it. And this is just for visual representation. It's not necessarily like statistically true that it's completely incorrect, because obviously there could be error, type 1 error here. But just for help with our interpretation, if I'm rejecting the null, I'm getting rid of it. So I'm supporting the alternative. I'm supporting that p is less than 0.15. So we're going to say that, let me just put this here. We have sufficient evidence to support the claim that, and I'm going to take the rest of this basically from here, that the, let's say that less than 15% of the patients get relief. Or we can say, or the population proportion is less than 15% for this particular situation. Okay. And typically when I'm wording this part, I always word it based on what's in, the problems. Like I'm copy and pasting, because this is what we're running the claim against. Am I supporting it or am I not? You know what I mean?